Hello, everybody. My name's Milan Starcic. Welcome to Freedom Rising, a podcast dedicated to empowering individuals on the journey to personal growth, lasting serenity, and freedom from addiction. Tune in and join the movement. Your journey to freedom starts here. We neither represent, promote, or demote any 12-step program or organization. We are merely souls on the path of recovery with the desire to expand our lives and experiences and share them with you. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 64th Recovery Freedom Rising podcast. I'm Milan Starcic with co-host Shannon B. Today's topics are steps 8 and 9. Would you please read step 8 for us, Shannon, and share what this step means to you?
I sure would. Step 8. Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. So this step means to me is really where we start to get into the personal relationships that we've had and personal relations as a whole. So the way that it was explained to me when I started this step work is I'm to the best of my ability bringing into my recollection everyone that I've caused harm as a result of who I was in my addiction, right? And then asking and praying for the willingness to be able to correct that. I can't go on and continue to live in a life. Sorry, I can't go on living in a life of solution and continue to live the way that I did when I was in addiction. So we're not here to avoid anyone. I'm here to take accountability, clear my side of the street, really.
I love that.
What about you?
Well, I think over time my opinion on this one really changed, and the biggest profound moment for me was this guy from Southern California came on the online meeting that I was doing there fairly religiously last year, and he came on twice. And the second time he came on, it was a day where the Just for Today was about self-acceptance. And he described it like this: like, okay, imagine I have an unmade amends to Shannon, and I might have lied to Shannon, I might have stole from Shannon, and I might not have, treated her with any tolerance. So Shannon calls me, though, because on the surface, we're still interacting like friends, but every time my phone rings, it's like I see Shannon and I see liar, intolerant, and and so what it is that until we can clear out those amends, we can't really ever walk around the world not having these like self judgments pounded into our face just through interactions, through memories, through everything. And then once we make these amends, that frees us to kind of burst through into self acceptance, which will lead to us having acceptance and love for others.
You said that so well. When we talked last week about the week before prior, um, our character defects, right? This is a great example of being able to face those and practice the opposite. If we were very intolerant of somebody, this gives us an opportunity to be tolerant.
And most people's amends list uh, is somewhat based upon their moral inventory. Like if it's not, I think that you're doing the work twice, maybe for nothing. Like but that's why there was there was somebody on that podcast for the first time the other day, and they were talking about how some people like to burn their moral inventory, and the person's like, whoa, 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 like that's still your list that you're going to be building off of for your amends. And I thought that was kind of an important point, for anybody who's out there. Maybe do your amends before you burn that list, even if you want to burn it, because you've kind of just put all this work into gathering this information about your past. So why not put that to use?
Yeah.
It's probably the most thorough and accurate list you'll have created as a self-assessment in your adult life.
Yeah, it's a solitary appraisal, right? Where we're looking and we've had our sponsor to guide us through this too. And we're looking, we're saying, hey, it's not just, people. It could be, hey, I owe a financial amends, or, I haven't paid any income tax. That's something I need to get around to filing. Like it's really growing up in this program too. And being the adult that we want to be, being, fit to live the way that our higher power wants us to, which is not walking around in fear, acting out of faith. And really, the harm's already been done. What we're doing is taking accountability for it. Like, that's the right thing to do. It's not like we can go back and change what's happened, right? But we can be better moving forward.
Absolutely. I thought that was well put. So today I'm going to ask, do you want to start the questions and ask me a question?
So, when you went to make your list of people that you had harmed, right? Did you find that a lot jumped out right away, or did it take you a bit more time to reflect?
So one of the things that, it's funny because the book kind of talks about it like, convenient forgetting or something like that, you know, but I honestly, in my case, I really had so many blackout occurrences when drinking, and then when I would be up for days, in a drug experience, I would almost barely remember some of the days. And so for me, what I thought was a complete list, I'd be driving down a road and see a house and be like, holy shit, that night. And, so it's almost like have a little memo in my phone and have to pull over and add to it, even to today, because of memory problems, like I believe that there is um some natural instinct to block out traumatic things from your life, and that was proven to me before I even began alcohol or drugs, because there was something that happened in my childhood, and then it was like triggered by a memory from like an early girlfriend when I was 14, and I was like, holy shit, like that happened to me too, and I had completely blocked that out of my mind. So I think that there's some of that, but really for me it was and it has been continuing to be just a really bad memory system intact in my brain, and unfortunately, that's not coming back at a rapid rate. Like I just think some damages are done, and even though it is better than when I first got clean, it's not what it was in years past. And you know I'm also 52. Like there is a factor of that diminishment as well. So I hope that answers the question.
It does.
Yeah.
For me, there was the obvious ones, right? Like family, close friends, people who were in my inner circle, that I know my alcoholism drastically affected. To, like I've done this a couple times, right, over the years. And when I came back this time, it was making sure that when I was making this list that I was as thorough as I could be, right? There may be more that was added, but also that I was looking at the way in which my harm could have caused this time too, because I had had such a long time of sobriety, right? And I'd gone back out, and at that point, like a lot of people had been left in the dark in a way of how bad things really were, because nobody wants to say, I'm not doing well, things are going horrendously, but I can't stop and I'm not prepared to yet, to their family, because that's very scary, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, it was really making that list, but also I had a lot of aha moments like you too. I'd be driving down the road or I'd think of something, or I would keep praying, right? God, please bring into my thoughts, and into the front of my brain, like who I may be missing. And it would like be like a light bulb. Like I'd be watching a TV show and it would trigger something and I'm like, oh, that. And then there was ones that frankly I just didn't want to make, I was a little bit skeptical about it. I was like, oh, this doesn't feel good. But that's when I know that's my fear talking,
Mhm.
right? So
And
it takes
okay,
time sometimes.
I think it does take time, and I do think we need to be on it, but I think there's some that are just dangerous to make. Like
I think we can go into that in 9 too. We could even start kind of
mhm.
mixing today because they go very similar
Yeah.
if you want.
Well, I mean, whatever we do, it's us right now. By the end, we're gonna wave goodbye.
Should I
Okay,
read step 9 in case some of these tie in together, or do you wanna go one at a time?
let's give a few questions before we
Got it.
read none.
Okay.
Okay, so if we are now about to ask for forgiveness for ourselves, why shouldn't we start out by forgiving them, one and all? And how do you start the path to forgiveness, Shannon?
Mm. It's a journey, right? The forgiveness ultimately is so that I'm set free, right?
Mhm.
There are some harms that have been done to me over the years where, I don't have a part in that, right? Especially when it comes to abuse and stuff like that. But to be able to forgive, it doesn't mean that I'm saying it's okay or that I'm giving it a hall pass, right? It's that I cannot afford to have that anger and that toxicity and just that rage and frustration stuck in me and try and live happy, joyous, and free. Like that is a one way ticket to a bottle for me. So it's really, praying for God and also understanding too that people are flawed on, a lot of levels. And if it's something that's happened between, say, me and in a relationship with somebody who is also, not well, then I have to look at that person and treat them like a sick person too. Like I didn't do everything right. I got to give grace to others as well. Especially if I want it given to me in return.
So for myself, I think a real life-changing moment was, I guess it was probably about 5 or 6 years ago. I had a 94-year-old client and named Rosa, and she was a gem, like and a saint, and like the greatest scenery painter I've ever seen in the world. Like ultimately, oh my God, they looked real. Anyway, regardless of her artistic skills, she had a tattoo on her arm from the Nazi camps. And she said to me, like this was kind of like her one lesson to me that she felt important to purvey to, another generation. She said, nobody thinks that they're the villain. She's like, everybody is a culmination of their life experiences. And no matter how mean or badly they're treating someone, if you just see that child inside that got hurt, to think that those actions are okay, and that changed the way that I can, like, not like, I don't give people hall passes for abusive relationships or actions, like words or things. But I can see that scared, hurt child inside now who, like through whatever horrendous example, thinks that their actions are acceptable in a relationship kind of way. I can quickly remove myself from their presence, but I don't think I condemn them in the same way. Like I think I'm like, holy shit, what did they see? What happened to them? Because I do believe that something really bad normalized them to that kind of action, like, and I know that from my own childhood of having to fight so much and being in and then seeing, the people who were the bullies, like fathers, like beat the shit out of them in public, and things like that. So, for me, the I think that the path to forgiveness starts with like an awareness or an understanding that we're all hurt in some way, or sick in some way. And like for me, my actions have just been so far from perfect, and forgiveness has been given to me by so many people that it's just something, that, man, if I'm not giving out forgiveness, then how can I justify living the life that I'm getting to live to others, and not saying that it's a tit for tat thing, but it's just that those who've forgiven me have given me an understanding that really terrible things can be forgiven.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So well said. I like
Do
what that woman shared.
it was something that just really changed the way I can have compassion for other people forever. I mean, somebody who had family members gassed in this camp, and she's talking about understanding anybody, you know, like that's a big transformation um to have occurred, that one that I'm not sure that I would have made that same leap, but I think she had a lot of years to come to that, right?
She must have.
Yeah. Okay, do you got a question for me?
Well, we talked about the list, right? And
Mhm.
um, when you were making your list of amends and everything, were there people on there that you thought to yourself, I don't know if I can do this amends?
There was one, and that one was more out of safety than out of fear of talking to them. It was somebody who threatened my life, and basically told me at some point if we met again he was going to kill me. And so I spoke with it about it with my sponsor, and I ended up actually just writing a letter and reading it to my sponsor, because we both determined, after I told him all the details of everything, that it just wasn't, there was no foundation to believe that this person had changed their life and that there was going to be safety. And odds are it's like, I don't live near that person anymore. We don't interact. So why would I go stir the fire that could potentially bring a lack of safety? Like, one of the people that you're supposed to not harm in your amends is yourself. I'm putting your life back into jeopardy. So that was the one, like, for me, that, and that was difficult. Even writing that letter was difficult. But, with that person and that, I feel at peace now. And to be quite honest, if I ever meet that person and they have changed, I kept the letter. I would gladly, rip that out of the book and read it to him. But I just don't think that that's going to happen, unless, unless that person maybe gets themselves out of their own addiction, you know?
And that's
Yeah.
all you can hope, right? Is that,
Mm,
this person finds everything that you found today too.
mm. I hope so, really, because I think, if we listen to Rosa, there's probably a hurt child inside there, right?
There usually is, isn't there? Right?
Yeah.
Usually is.
And your response to your question?
Yeah, there was a few, that it wasn't that really that I had to make an amends to these people. It was more that it was things that had happened to me that I needed to forgive based on this also being a hurt person too, right? And there's shame around that and just a lot of different emotions and feelings. But like I said earlier, remembering that, no human being is perfect. People are flawed, not giving excuses for things, but you know, someone doesn't come from a healthy upbringing and a healthy life and have a healthy and happy heart and go out and harm others either. So I have to remember that too. And it says too, like about our resentments and everything in our literature, that in order to get that lifted is we pray for that person, right? Ongoing, that they have all of the wonderful things that we've received. And I try and remember that. But I also have far different boundaries too now. I don't give myself as much, I don't give people as much access to me to keep myself safe as well, too, right?
And that's a fine line to dance with, because you also don't want to cut yourself off from the flow of the universe by just being too guarded. It's something that you really, I think that boundary would need to have a certain fluidity to it,
Mm-hmm.
because I think,
Helps a little
like, as
easy.
you grow in your own acceptance, right? I think that you'll have a greater tolerance to people. And it doesn't mean letting them in to hurt you, but I think it's like, I had a really abusive fiance, and inside that, like, physically and emotionally, and that taught me what I do not accept into my life or will not allow to happen to me. but for the first period of post her, I was like, I ain't letting nobody in, like,
Yeah. Or
and
not
and
near
and
you,
that,
hey?
it's like the case of letting the asshole make you the asshole. Well, it's like, does the bully make you the victim, and then you hide in victimhood of like, I can't let anybody in, and
Mhm.
then that's just nowhere to be living either.
I think when we start living our life in recovery, though, and we've done the work that we have, we can better assess situations and our guard, though maybe our guard's up a little bit more. We're not putting ourselves in as many toxic or damaging situations, ideally, because we have a better read, right? Our inhibitions aren't down, like our, what's the word that I'm looking for? Um, we are able to protect ourselves a bit more, right? Like when I'm intoxicated in an environment like that, I don't have the best read on people.
Well, your assessment skills are
Thank you.
just
That's what
not
I'm looking
are
to think
not
of. I'm like,
clear, right? Like,
they're not, but today they are. And also, I don't believe what people tell me, but I always believe what they show me.
yeah, actions, yeah, like words are fucking cheap. We've proven to ourselves that you can wholesale bullshit all day long and at pennies on the dollar.
We're in the
Like,
business of it, right?
yeah,
We are.
yeah. Okie dokie. Are you ready for a question?
I am.
Okay. The prospect of actually visiting or even writing the people concerned now overwhelmed us, especially when we remembered in what poor favor we stood with most of them. How do you gather the strength and courage to begin asking for forgiveness?
Well, it's really entirely up to the person that I'm making the amends to, right? If they want to forgive me or not. Like,
Mm,
I'm going to do the part that I'm going to do.
mm,
Very important is that I'm giving them an opportunity to express to me how I've caused them harm, because my recollection, my assessment, what I think the damage may be, may not mirror what theirs is, right? So I'm not going in with an expectation of being forgiven. I'm going in with an expectation of taking full accountability for my part.
like that. That's
What
it.
about yourself? That's really
Um,
it, because you can dissect this down and down, like,
mm,
"Oh, I hope that this person can forgive me," but ultimately, I don't have that control, right? That's between them and their higher power, and is
self-will versus God's will right there.
yeah, and, it takes time to build trust and things like that too, so they may not off the bat, but you know what? I know I'm setting the ball in the right direction, heck of a lot more than just avoiding it or not taking any accountability or not, owning my part whatsoever.
And I think that, quite a lot like our moral inventory, there's something to be said about saying something out loud. Like, you may know I was a liar. I may know I'm a liar, but to have said, Shannon, I lied to you and I should not have lied to you. I should have been honest with you. That's a whole different thing than both of us subconsciously being aware of the lie,
Mhm.
and that definitely clears stuff out, like I felt for myself that by the time I started my amends, like, first of all, I had some, solid sponsor issues for almost the first 6 months of coming out of treatment. Like, first of all, getting my sponsor, then my first sponsor not working out, and then spending a couple months being sponsored by an idiot right here, and then getting my next sponsor, and then once I got him, it was like starting at the beginning again, and which rightly so. I really wanted to actually do that with him, so that delayed my amends by a lot, because they always say don't do your amends without discussing it with someone else, because and most certainly I would have definitely hurt others in the eagerness to clear my own slate. um and so when I finally got to that point, man, there was some I just couldn't wait to get off my chest. There was some that I was dreading like crazy, and not knowing how they would go. But I think that through the guidance of somebody else, really important not to just be like, hey, I'm going to dive into this and not even pass it by anybody what you're going to do. Like for me, I think um discussing that with your sponsor or a calibration brother or sister inside the program before you get there is essential,
Essential.
essential. And and mostly so that you don't fuck up other people's lives or your own. Like we can't clear our slate by hurting someone else's. And honestly, like if you don't think it's going to screw up your life too, then it's real short-sighted. Like to just destroy relationships that you're trying to mend because because of because you're like part of it is that we're still self-centered and we're still seeing it from our side. Even if we think our work is clear as a bell, I guarantee other people are going to be like, whoa, you missed that part, that's going to feel like that. And I know that from my own amends conversations. And I also know that from every conversation I've had with a sponsee who's about to do amends. Like there's always the other side that we're somehow like have blind spots on. And it is really important not to hurt others. Like, isn't what we're doing trying to be better human beings, And it doesn't start with
Yeah,
like another road of carnage.
sure doesn't.
hmm So, okay, do you got a question for me?
Um, how did you maneuver taking ego out of this? Because we're dealing with complex human emotions. We're dealing with ego, which is the killer and destroyer of all relationships. And also, we want to be careful when we're going into this too, because sometimes there's things that maybe the person doesn't remember or they don't know, and we're not here to go out and cause more harm. So when you're making that list, right, and you're thinking of these things, are you preparing yourself too for when you're going to make that amends of how you want to show up?
Yes. And so it varied from amends to amends. Some were very pre-planned and some were not. And it never went the way I thought. Some went amazingly and some went painfully. And unfortunately, that's really life on life's terms. Like if we're there to just have an open admission and to change ourselves, then there's gonna be some unaccepted apologies. And like just because we're ready to change doesn't mean other people are ready to let go of the past. And
Or
that's
accept a changed version of us, right? Because we've
yeah.
said things so many times in the past, and
But that
some
isn't that
people,
holding on to who we were on their part, like
and
they're
that's
like,
why we don't have control over it, right? We can
yeah,
only go in and do what we can do.
yeah. So that was, yeah. I think that's my response on that one.
I like that. Truly, it is the beginning of like isolation from our fellows and from us with God, right? So there's no more avoidance, no more, my disease has put me into this tiny, tiny world where I'm closed off from other people. And now I'm rejoining everyone as the person that I'm supposed to be. And this is the path forward in that.
Love that. I love that. It made me think of one of the ladies who came on this podcast, and one of the ways that she goes out and she calls it like her insurance policy
Mm.
is she shows up somewhere and she says, announces it to everybody there. Hey, I'm in a 12-step program. I don't drink and I don't do drugs. I just wanted to make everybody aware of that because I just, you know, I'm not going to partake. I'm not trying to curb anybody's style, but she said since she's been doing that, she's never had anybody offer her anything. But I feel like in a way, it's like it sets the tone for her boundaries and her interactions with other people but also, bringing this back to amends is that, by us talking about what we did wrong, what we should have done, what, we'd like to do in the future, and acknowledging how, like if there's something else that somebody would like, for us to be doing as part of the amends, it's a similar thing where we're kind of taking out an insurance policy on the future, but actually having the discussion. It's not like I'm going to change, but we're not going to talk about it. And and
I'm gonna
and,
keep that to myself and
mhm.
in
Yeah,
case someone offers me something and I decide to not be fully truthful with that one, and then I'm running the risk of drinking or using again.
but like in not necessarily like I was relating it to her insurance policy on her using or drinking,
Mm.
but it's also an insurance policy on our defects and shortcomings,
I like
in the
that.
same way. And so it's like telling on ourselves in advance, hey, this is a problem I had, this is a problem I'm trying to change. Maybe going forward we can work on this together. Like you could tell me when this is happening because I won't always see it. I'm pretty good at hiding stuff from myself and probably really good at hiding it from you. You know,
Yeah.
so I just thought that related into that in a
Yeah.
kind of a, in a cool way that I've never seen it displayed like that in literature, but something that I thought about. I've
I,
got one more on 8,
yeah.
and then maybe you could read 9. But
Let's do
are
it.
you do you have more on 8, or are
I
you kind of
don't.
okay?
I got a few
Okay.
zingers on 9 though.
Okay, so here we go on 8. Last one on 8. Since defective relations with other human beings have nearly always been the immediate cause of our woes, including alcoholism, no field of investigation could yield more satisfying and valuable rewards than this one. How much more did you learn about yourself in the 8th step than your steps 4 to 6?
Mhm. 8 showed me deeper in a pattern, right? So 8 really made me have to stop hard and self-reflect on how I've shown up in relationships, how I have lived as a result of, being in my addiction and being in untreated alcoholism and all of that. And it was pretty crystal clear that even if it wasn't direct harms by my words, my actions could have shown that too, right? Being standoffish, avoiding, not showing up for others. Like it was very glaring just how self-centered I had been living my life. So that was probably the biggest eye opener for me too, is that it was so built around self that there was no room for God, let alone, I had such unrealistic expectations too of people. Um, I was always like, if only I had this, this would be better, you know, didn't realize that it was an inside job. And it's like looking at a blueprint of how you got to where you are, really.
Yeah, well put.
And why I was, often in conflict with others or didn't have successful, healthy relationships. And, when you're always looking outwards instead of looking inwards, you're giving other people the control to dictate how you're going to feel and how you're going to show up. But really, I have my own accountability in all of that, right? And I get a say in my own life.
I love that.
What about yourself?
Well, for myself, definitely it brought out to forefront my fear of accountability.
Mm,
Like I was like all fine writing my step 4, like 120 pages later, my step 6, another 60. I was great on paper. I was great one to one. I was great even, asking for help with it from, my newly burgeoning relationship with my higher power. But man, I was scared shitless talking to people about it. Like, the actual people. Like I could tell you all day long, everybody I hurt, but to look someone else in the eye and talk about the things I did was it was scary as fuck for me. And it was
the safety net's gone, right?
well, the
You're
safety net's gone, and it's just like I think being willing to make amends and actually making amends, real easy for me to be willing to make an amend, but to actually make the call and say, hey, can we have a talk on Thursday? And then like Thursday's there, and I'm like, whoa, here we go. I'm
You're
going
like, maybe I jumped the gun a
in.
little too quick on this. I should have pushed it out another
Ah,
week.
yeah, like I'm like, I don't think they're ready. It's like me shaking inside. Like it just showed me that I had a lot more fear than I was, and that I was carrying a lot more shame than I would have admitted before being confronted with that reality. Like I think I was able to be like, the tough guy. I'm gonna make it through my meds. It's all fine. Look at my step forward. But it's like there's something about actually talking to the person that we hurt, not to the paper. Like
Yeah.
it just not the same thing. And so, and man, I'm not going to text an amends to someone. I'm sorry, but I will never ever text an amends to somebody. And then some of it's like, how do I find that person's phone number or whatever? Like, there's some people that I'm like, Cherry. And I was like, I don't even know their last name.
Mhm.
And we never could like, and it was pre-Facebook and we never connected. Like there's some things where it's like I feel a little bit lost in ability to connect, even in this modern age, like, and then there was one person where this is where Facebook can be really fucking weird. I thought about this person. I never said this person's name out loud. And the next day, that person was in my friend's suggestions on Facebook. And I was like, oh my God,
God.
do I ever have to make this amends now? So, yeah, I hope that answers that. Okay, can you read us step 9 and say what this means to you, please, Shannon B?
Step 9, made direct amends to such people whenever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. So for 9, when it says direct amends, I'm going face to face with the people from my amends list to the best of my ability, right? There is going to be ones where they're not here anymore, and I will go through an alternative amends process with my sponsor guiding me through that. There's also people like you mentioned, um, where you're not quite sure how to get in touch with them. So I pray to God to place that person in my path when He says it's time, right? And then I can ask for time to sit down and make that amends. Like I'm always asking, right? I'm not assuming. I'm not calling somebody and saying, "Hey, can we get together?" But like that, I'm letting them know, setting the stage so that they also have the option to decide whether that works for them or not. And when I am there, right, I'm using good judgment, careful timing, right, courage, and prudent, uh, prudence when I'm doing these because I'm not going into any of these to cause more harm, right? This isn't about me getting it all off my chest. It's not about an overshare. It's not about bringing people into it that have nothing to do with it. I'm dealing with people head on, you know, and sticking to things. Also, when I'm making these amends, the behavior has to be changed. If I am not capable of changing that behavior yet, I have no business making the amends because that's manipulation. It's emotional manipulation. And it's going in and saying, hey, I want to take accountability for what I've done, but I'm actually still engaging in these behaviors. No point,
Great point. Great point.
right? We're not here to hold people emotionally hostage. It's not for my betterment in
Mhm.
terms of feeling better, right? It is for my recovery. But when I'm making these amends too, and I'm asking this person for this time, and I'm sitting down and I'm explaining, right? And I'm taking that accountability. It's not about sorry. It's about here's how I know that I've harmed you. I don't, I'm not that person anymore. These are the steps that I've taken. But I also want to give you an opportunity to explain to me how I can make this right. And also other ways in which I may have harmed you that I'm not aware. Because like I said before, like I could think it's one way with my sister and she could be like, well, actually it was all the worry you caused me. And if
Yeah,
you don't give her a chance to speak, once again, it's me running the show. And I'm not there for that.
I love that. That's awesome. I really liked what you said there, Shannon. And, it definitely brought about a few things for me to think about, the way that I was shown to do it. And for anybody who's new out there, I just don't think we kind of reviewed it, but you make your list of amends, but you tell people, what you did. You tell people how it was wrong. You tell people what you should have done. If you were acting correctly in spiritual principles, and then you ask them if there's anything that you missed, and the anything that you missed can be the most painful part. You think it's like you think, okay, I've got a pretty thorough list here. And it's kind of like Shannon said, when she was talking about her sister, and it was like, oh no, well, it was the sleepless nights. There's so many things that you may have forgotten, or you may slough off to not be a majorly important thing that was like the soul crushing part of it. And so, the exercise in amends making might be one of the greatest exercises in learning to reduce expectations that I've ever been through. Because for myself, you know, um, it started out with a couple really big amends that were well received. And that created the expectation for me that as long as I was thorough and I was, ready to change and changing and showing I was changing, that this was going to be a great process. And then the next one was like devastatingly bad. Went so like, and by bad it means like against my expectation of it. And that was so soul crushing at that moment. And I really realized it's like, whoa, okay, that's all based on my expectation. Anyway, that's it for me on
Well,
that.
that's pretty good to hear you say that because that can happen, right? Like we're not
Yeah.
shouting from the rooftops here. What changed? Also we've, developed this relationship with our higher power too, where it's not like we're going out, good news, I found God, I put the bottle down or I put the pipe down, whatever your um drug of choice may be. I know I've done this, yada, yada, yada. That's not who I am anymore. I'm sorry. Let's move on. Like we're not here to be getting all, catapulted into this spiritual high that everything's going to go a certain way because it doesn't. And you just shared on a great experience like that. I'm also not here either to lighten my load, like, emotionally or verbally vomit to them about everything. Like, and it's said in a room sometimes, right? Like, say that there's been some actions that have been done to somebody that they're just not aware of, right? They have no idea. I don't need to go and cause them more harm by sharing that. That also doesn't mean that I'm not holding myself accountable or I'm being dishonest or anything like that. But it says, except when to do so would cause harm to others. We're not here
Mm.
to do that. For example, if someone was to engage in, a romantic or sexual relationship with somebody who's married, and that person will use, I'm a female, so say that I had engaged with somebody who was a married man, right? And this is a hypothetical, everyone. Who am I to go knocking on ish, right? Who am I to go knocking on the family door to his wife and
Yeah.
say, good news, I'm off the bottle now. I'm not going to be involved with your husband anymore. Just want to let your kids know I'm sorry for the time I took their dad away from you.
Your kids know. Oh, yeah. You're going deep on that.
But I've shared this before because people don't understand, right? They think like sometimes it's just like I've got to relieve myself of all this. No, if she doesn't know about that, who am I to be doing that? That's not my place, right? What my place is to never engage in a behavior like that again. And I remembered it was shared in a room before by a gentleman that he sat down with his ex-fiance or ex-girlfriend or something, right? And started to unburden himself. I know I wasn't faithful to you, this. And they're getting through this conversation and she stops and she says, what do you mean you weren't faithful to me? Like she had no clue. So now this is caused her far more damage, and he's now re-traumatized and re-hurt her,
In
right?
fact, I've heard of people who that's ended their relationship multiple times. People
Absolutely.
people making amends like that, like before they've run it by anybody. Like, trust me, you run that one by me, I'm going to be like, whoa, Betsy, pull them reins in.
Oh, it's like, and I see this too in sponsees I've worked with over the years. I'm like, we're gonna talk about this. Like, I want you to tell me what it is you're wanting to say, and I'm gonna guide you through this process so that we've got a clear-cut plan here. You're not going in this and winging it. Also, too, if I'm going and if I'm saying to and I'm using this example with my sister because she's such a close person to me, right? Is that okay, say if she was like, sister, I was very worried about you over the years, you weren't here when I needed you, just yada, yada. These are examples of things family may say to us. And then I make an amends for that, okay? And then she turns around and invites me to dinner or invites me to a holiday or asks me to look after my niece and nephew. And I blow that off. That's not an amends. Nothing's changed. So I think long and hard before I go and set out to do those amends. Like, am I
Hmm.
capable of being the person I'm going to tell them I'm going to be? Because if I'm not, then that amends need to be postponed. Also, I thank the person at the end of my amends. Thank you for taking the time to sit down with me. But when I'm asking them if they're open to this so that I'm not luring anybody anywhere under false pretense, if they're not, that's okay. I let them know I'm here when they are.
Mhm. Now, though, okay, when you talk about behaviors changed, right? Would you not make an amends then, even if you're willing to start making that change? Like we never free ourselves of defects right
Willing,
away. But
willing is
but
one thing.
yeah,
Not even sure if I can do it. No, not just to get it off my chest.
but okay. Okay. So, but like, what if you're willing but unsure if you can do it? Like, I mean, like for myself, something that I struggle with on a constant basis is intolerance and anger. And so if I'm making amends at being intolerant for someone, but I'm willing to change, but I keep falling into that pitfall, you wouldn't make that amends? And I'm just asking because now I feel a little bit perplexed and confused. And I just want to hear your opinion on this because I value it.
To do something good to show that you're sorry about what you've done, to make an amends is to have changed your behavior. So, acknowledgement is one thing, right? But
Yeah.
see, this is where I'm kind of using that, okay?
Mhm.
If I am in a relationship, okay, and I have spoken down to and disrespected my partner numerous times over the years as a result of my drinking and who I was, okay?
Mhm.
And I go and I smooth that all over with them, right? But I'm not doing any work to ensure that this isn't my same fallback behavior, then that's
Mhm.
not an amends. If I'm saying, hey, I know this is a character defect of mine, I'm going to practice to the best of my ability the opposite of that. That doesn't mean I'm going to be perfect. God's going to remove it when He does, but I'm certainly going to do better than I have before. That is a direction and a change behavior. So, like you're saying,
Yeah, but that's kind of what I meant is that,
Mhm.
you know, I could give up on all my amends because I'm going to falter in my quest towards, the progress towards perfection, right? But like when does that cross the line then of where you can make the amends and not? Like, do you see?
When you have an absolute intolerance to change. When
Okay,
you're doing it just because you wanna check it off the list.
okay, yep,
Amends made to mom for not
yep,
calling her for all these years. 0 intention of ever calling. Done.
yeah. Like last thing I want to do is talk.
Because we're human, right? We're
Yeah.
not gonna be perfect. Like, I am going to fall
Mm,
short for sure, but am I going to do to the best of my ability to try and change? Yes, and what does that look like, right?
mm,
So maybe it is, for example, intolerance is hard for you or anger, okay? If you're going to make an amends to your wife, we'll just say, "Hey, I know I've shown up very angrily in situations before. I'm not happy with myself for that. I want to change that." Maybe you're more receptive moving forward that if you do fall into that, you have a game plan of how you're not going to, take that train off the track. Oh, I feel
Hmm.
I'm getting heated. You know what? I'm going to take 5 minutes and I'm going to go pray and I'm going to reset. Or can we
Hmm.
revisit this conversation when I'm in a better place? Or asking them, hey, you know what? Can we parking lot this for a second? And I commit to sitting down with you tonight at 6 p.m. and having this conversation. That is all change behavior, right?
Hmm.
But it's if you're like, hey, I'm just going to tell my wife this to get her off my back. And then the second she says anything that irritates me, I'm right back in defect. And now it's her fault.
Hmm.
Changing the pattern of behavior. Does that make
Nice.
more sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So, just through our initial conversation here, my first question on 9 is taken up. So I'm going to jump to my second
Sure.
question. It's all right. I feel that,
I'm real
um,
passionate about 9 because I've seen this go left so many
yeah.
times too,
And you know
right?
what? You're just real passionate about the program, and that's why I love you, and that's why we're here because we don't dick around on this stuff.
No, we
And,
don't.
okay, so after taking the preliminary trial or taking this preliminary trial at making amends, we may enjoy a sense of relief that we conclude our task is finished. We will want to rest on our laurels. The temptation to skip the more humiliating and dreaded meetings that still remain may be great. Did you find yourself resting on your laurels at
Yeah.
any point in your amends?
Not in my amends, but in my recovery, that's for sure. There was amends I hadn't made because truly it didn't dawn on me. You know what I
Mm.
mean? That I needed to
Oh,
make
yeah.
them. And it's working with sponsors over the years that it's been like, hey, you actually do need to go out and make these amends. There's also a
Mhm.
few I have not wanted to make, period. Right. And I've prayed for the willingness to be able to. I also have to make sure that when it comes to readiness, I'm not just putting things off and filing it under the umbrella of fear. Does that make sense? Like,
Yep.
oh, well, I'm not ready to make this amends yet. But really, it's not that I'm not ready, it's that I'm too scared to.
Yeah.
And for me, I've always been a person in my personality. I like to face things head on. Like I have not been accused of talking about people behind their back. I've been accused of being very comfortable with confrontation, as some of my loved ones have said, right? So for me, it's not like that quiet church mouse that's going to go over here and get, 15 friends on the phone and start building a camp. Not that I'm not capable of that too, but I do address things head on. I don't want to ever be somewhere and have to be like, oh no, I got to
Mm.
avoid this person. Like I want to be ready and on guard. And I've worked with sponsors over the years that have been like, hey, I know I need to make this amends to this person, but I'm not doing it. And I'm like, careful what you say because God's going to put that person in your path. And I literally had a conversation with the sponsor. She called me the next morning and goes, you'll never guess. I ran into this freaking old landlord of mine in a grocery store. And I'm like, there you go.
Yep.
And financial amends too. So that's a big one for that. Is it going to be a change behavior? If I owe money, I need to resolve that right away.
Mm.
But that doesn't mean that once that's paid off, I go back into my old behaviors of, mm, the government will get their money when they get their money. I'll pay my
Mm.
credit card when I feel like it. It's that I'm being more responsible in my actions. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does. I love that. We used to do a reading together in the treatment center. We went to everybody, and part of it talked about resting on our laurels.
Mm-hmm.
And I will admit that I thought laurels was your ass. I thought it was like sitting on your ass instead of doing the work. And I understand what it is now, but it was just so funny. Like I pictured, quit sitting on your ass, like resting on your laurels, but it's actually like your accolades, you
Yeah.
know? And anyway, I just thought it was really funny how dumb I was towards that. But so I definitely whether whether it was like a subconscious action or a conscious action, there was just periods where I knew I had amends to make and they weren't getting done. And like I explained earlier, just consequently with my entire shifting sponsor, non-sponsor, idiot sponsor, great sponsor situation, they were delayed a fair bit. and I don't recommend that for anybody. Like a part of this doing these amends is a massive part of this program. And it's a massive part about you moving forward from the bonds of your past, like it's way
Helping
easier to live.
rebuild or build new healthy relationships.
Mhm.
Haven't even, set right the ones in the past, right?
But also too, like, they say you can't have conscious contact with your higher power unless you're being present. Well, living in shame and guilt is certainly one way to keep you from the present moment.
Sure.
So, yeah. So, like I think in an effort to have that spiritual awakening and to be able to live presently so that, you know, um I'm not trapped in the past or the future, the amends are essential.
Mhm.
Amends are essential. Like they trap you in the past, but they also trap you in the future of like, what if I ever see that person? What am I going to say to that person? Like there's that kind of like living in the future of it, and having an expectation of what that relationship is going to be like when you see that person.
Well, it
You know.
endorses more dysfunctional behavior too, right? If I'm
Hmm.
avoiding and I'm like, yeah, that I don't need to make that amends. Who cares? I'll never see that person again, right? What's going to stop me from then acting in that same behavior moving forward and then cutting that person out of my life because I don't want to take the accountability? It's how free do I want to be? How, solution oriented do I want to be? What is my level of commitment to my recovery? Well, I'm willing to go to any lengths, like it tells me in the steps. Also, not making amends is a way to go right back into a life of addiction. It also, gets me into self-righteousness and ego. I have no time for that anymore. How the person takes it is really none of my business. Like,
Mm.
you know what I mean? And their behaviors is none of my business either. It's, hey, here's the situation. I'm asking you if it's okay if I can make this amends to you. You say it's yes. Let's sit down. Let's have this conversation. I'm going to be tolerant and in a position to receive the information. If I'm going in there getting defensive, that's another reason why I wouldn't be fit to make the amends because that isn't a change behavior, right? They might
Mm.
throw some stuff at you that you're like, whoa, and that's going to hit a nerve, right? But I don't have to agree with it all either. I just have to be willing to hear their point of view.
Mm.
It's not a blame
Absolutely.
game. We're not going in there tit for tat either. And I'm not crawling before anybody either. I'm not there to be browbeaten or, ripped apart as a human. I'm here to admit that I'm flawed and let them know that I don't want to be that person anymore. I also don't have to have an expectation either of keeping this person in my life. It's not all to mend relationships. It's just to take accountability. Sometimes that person doesn't need to be in my life anymore.
Yeah, well said. Gosh, you're on fire today, Shannon.
9 is a big one for me because it leads into
Yeah.
10, which is what I live in, right?
So, and that being said, is that for 10, 11, and 12, they're all going to be their own separate podcasts.
That's
I
correct.
feel like they are just so unique
Huge.
and
Unique.
huge, unique and huge in their own way that they deserve a full chunk.
They
Okay,
will. We
so
did these together because they kind of
yeah,
drop in, right?
yeah, absolutely. And so, do you have a question for me?
I think we've talked so much about what our 9 looks like. So for me, I guess I will, my really last question around 9 for you is how did you feel coming out of your amends process? And how has that changed your recovery?
Okay, so overall, it definitely, made my phone ringing less painful. Like I had said, um, there is there is still an incompleteness about it for me that I feel like I need to, I feel like I need to connect with some people that have come up on that phone memo list, like I said, that I haven't dealt with. And then, I still feel like, being so new into the program, that there's many living amends and financial amends that I'm just not capable of finishing yet. and
But you've made a start, and
but I have
what
made
do
a
you think you
start, but like for me, just like seeing an ever growing debt financially doesn't make me feel like I've started climbing the mountain. And so it's just and I've made some recent steps um towards getting further with that. But it just still feels like I got a long way to go. That's all.
and it's a process, it's a journey, but what
Yeah.
you said is, "I've made some steps towards that." What you're not
Yeah.
doing is avoiding it and pretending it's not there.
Mm.
You're also not
No,
sitting on a pile of money saying, "I'm not gonna pay a student loan off because I don't feel like I want to."
certainly not sitting on a pile of money.
But do you know what I mean? Like,
I
people
know
say, like,
exactly
"I
what
don't,
yep.
it's gonna be there anyways." No, your
Mm.
debt is going to be there. It's part of life, right? And
Yep.
it ebbs and flows in our finances, but you're not avoiding anything anymore. And that is where
Mhm.
real change comes.
I agree. So I have one more question. Oh no, you've got to answer your question.
So much more freeing, right? And I can
Mm.
show up and be comfortable in myself too. And I want to have healthy relationships. I don't want to fall back
Mhm.
into the same, you know, behaviors and defects that I have in the past. And this has given me that freedom. Also, it gives me the ability to live life the way God wants me to live. And that is being accountable, being a good human, and, giving people the opportunity to to know that I truly am, sorry for the harms that I've caused, and that I can show them that my behaviors change. Like that, it's a beautiful gift to be able to have this opportunity. A lot of people don't, and they live in that anger and that stuckness. And I had no time for that.
You certainly don't. I love that. Okay,
Question.
I've got one more question here, and I'm not sure if we've covered it in our other conversations, but we could cover it again a little bit
Do
anyway.
it.
Okay, above all, we should try to be absolutely sure that we are not delaying because we are afraid.
Mhm.
For readiness to take the full consequences of our past acts and to take responsibility for the well being of others at the same time is the very spirit of step 9. Has fear delayed you, and how did you overcome the fear to make your amends?
Yeah, there's always some fears wrapped around things, right? Especially when it's an icky feeling to me, like knowing that I have to, relive and own the way that I've showed up, or conversations that I would never have even kicked off or been a part of, right? If I had been sober and in my right mind. So yeah, there's been some gross feelings around it, right? I'm human. I have conscious. Um, so yeah, there's been times where it's been like, ick, I don't know how this is gonna go, and I really don't want to, right? But that's when I rely on God. God's already forgiven me. So I just need to go in and take accountability, and the outcome is truly not for me to decide. It's not going to go away if I keep avoiding it. It's still going to be there. But at least if I deal with it head on, it might feel gross, but I'm free of it.
Absolutely. Well said. That's all I've got for questions. And I've got to say that today I felt like you were on fire. You hit the nail on the head so many times today, Shannon.
I felt the
And
same about you, my friend. I learned so much from you, and I'm glad that we have this.
oh, I love this. I love this. We have a great time. And I wanted to suggest something is that when we're done our series on the steps, there's a person that he was one of the support workers at Options, Bryant. And I've been doing a bunch with Bryant. And I feel that me, you, and Bryant would have some great
Let's go.
conversations.
Let's
Yeah.
go.
Okay. So anyway, then I guess everybody out there, tune in next time for more recovery fun. Bye
Bye,
bye,
everybody. See
everybody.
you next
Yes,
week.
we love you. I do. Please help us help others. If you've liked what you've seen here today, please subscribe and share this podcast and help us get to 100 followers. We're looking for interaction with our audience. So please email recoveryfreedomrising@gmail.com or contact Milan South Okanagan Starcic on Facebook with questions, topic suggestions, or just comments. We'd love to hear from you.